So, as we said, that engagement process, that listening around it, means that in our environment we create communities around products. So, for example, within regard to Facebook, we create a community around sales logics. So there is a sales logics fan book, so people can go and look at it. And it generally pulls people together into one place. So rather than us having to market to them, we can use Facebook as an environment where we can go and see and post information about sales logics, about up and coming events. We can use that information then to scatter out. So from our perspective, we want to say there's a new version coming out, or this is how you fix a common problem, or any of those things. Those use of those environments gives you that voice. The other thing to get started, and one of the things that we also use social media for, as well as publishing information, if that makes sense, is to actually start to listen. As with many environments, the first stage of the selling process is to listen. So using the information on Facebook, you can search Twitter, you can set up set searches within LinkedIn, for example, and start to see as people start to mention information about your products or the services or the environment that you work in, start to monitor and listen to those environments. This takes me to quite a busy slide. But the idea is that what we can do within this environment, and this is where the Sage CRM tools come into place, is that once we start to send information out to those environments, that listening and who said what, what's happened next, how we can start to take advantage of that information is something that then we bring back down into our CRM system, aggregate it together, and use it to kind of update and start to potentially target people accordingly. But also to use the free of charge tools. There are other tools available, things like Google Alerts, Google Analytics, which I'll come on to later, that also wrap around your social media state, social media environment, to start to give you an insight as to the kind of information that's out there and is being talked about your products or goods and services. So moving on, aware that we kind of run through this fairly quickly. Happy to take questions at the end. I've noticed there are a few which I may well deal with separately as we go forward. So what I would just move on to is top tips, something that you can package up and take away with you just as we get towards the end of this morning's webcast. So 6 top tips. First and foremost, which is an assumption, I guess, before we start, make sure you actually have a plan in place already. One of the key things really within social media is you need to be able to understand whether it's worked or not. You need to understand where you are at the moment. So what sort of traffic are you getting on your website? Do you use things like web analytics, or have you got search engine optimization in place already? Is it natural, or do you pay for sponsored link? So start to have an understanding of where you stand currently. There are sites available that will monitor your website, that will have a look at it. Google Analytics is a tool that will provide you information about how many visitors are approaching your website, how long they're doing, and Google Analytics, as I said earlier on, is free. The other key thing really is check the content on it is actually worthwhile. If you're going to start driving people to it, make sure you're proud of it. Make sure it has information on your website that is relevant, is up to date, and is going to be of value to those clients. And at the outset, understand what you're hoping to achieve with social media. And I guess this is kind of a round table kind of conversation, depending on the types of goods and services that you supply. What are you looking to achieve? Do you just want to drive people to your website to buy more stuff? Or is the environment that you're in not something that people just buy your products off a website, but you want to get to a trusted advisor status? You want people to come to you for questions so that you can then help and guide them going forward, because that's the nature of your business, your consultancy business, for example. So, as I said, first tip, make sure you know what's going on your existing site and where you stand. Number 2, don't just kind of abandon your offline channels. It's part and parcel of your environment is to use social media alongside printed matter, advertising, whatever other channels that you're doing. Make sure that you don't kind of just switch off from one. Small organizations have an environment where you don't have countless resources to go and to create, so you do have to pick. But basically from an environment of social media, one, don't switch off all the stuff that you're already doing. You can start to kind of tread the water within social media, start it off lightly, but also is that you can also then start to focus on the environments that are relevant to you. And that, I guess, moves me on to number 3. So pick the channels where you feel you'll have the most impact. If you're in business-to-business environment, the good one to start with is usually LinkedIn. If you're in business-to-consumer, Facebook is a good example, good place to start with. And again, it depends where your clients, where your customers tend to already be congregating, and that's where you need to get to. Use those environments. Don't try and be on everywhere at every place, particularly if you're a smaller environment. It's a very difficult and onerous task to try and keep all the people happy all the time. So go where the biggest number of them are. And that, again, I guess, leads me back to number 2. So focus on those key areas, the key social media channels where most of your people work, and don't ignore your other marketing environments. Use it as a complementary environment to drive people to it. So your webcast, so your website, you're using social media to drive to that environment. Don't let your website fall into disrepair, as they say. Now, number 3, which is kind of running on from that, is if you haven't done already, get your feet wet. Even if it's not for a business environment, do it personally, because that's a good place to start to learn. You can kind of understand how it all works. There's lots of tricks and tips depending on which environments work best for you. Things like hashtags in Twitter, for example, allow you to consolidate content around a certain search theme. But it's get yourself familiar with those environments. It's a good way of understanding how they work and starting to pick up on some of the what to do's and what not to do's, is to get into those environments and then pick the channels for your business going forwards. Actually, just quickly jumping back, one of the other things I would suggest, which comes as part of 3, is make sure you grab the land. Set up those official channels. Even if you don't actually start to use them, make sure you grab the land of those domains and those names before somebody else does. If you own a brand name, or your product is a brand name, or you've got your company name, make sure you have, just in the same way that you will have done a number of years ago, get your web address, your www.dmc.co.uk web address, for example, or company name or brand name. Make sure you get your Twitter name, your LinkedIn, your Facebook. Get those domains secured, even if you don't start to use them, just to make sure that nobody else sort of pinches them and cyber squats on them or uses them to generate potentially negative information about your organization. Now, the other thing is to understand within the organization who is going to operate within the social media space. Find out if there are people within your company already or organization who are already doing it. And also, it's well worth putting some guidelines in place as to what your expectations are. If those people are talking about your company and your products, then be very clear about the guidelines about what they can say, and ensure, just as they did with email and telephone over the years, that they understand the impact and the business goals going forward using those environments. So ensure that they realize they need not to slag off the customers, for example, or to say things that are derogatory about another product or service offered by a competitor. May sound like common sense, but it's well worth making it very clear as to what your people can or should or shouldn't say, and potentially also maybe put a process, if people are going to have blogs, for example, make sure that the content is read and checked and people understand that the organization needs to go through that process to make sure you're all singing off the same hymn sheet. Also, I guess, with regards to this, and it kind of leads on from number 4, is to understand who's going to do it. Somebody needs to take ownership of social media within the organization. So who's going to do it, and be very clear that once it's started, it's something that you can't really switch off and just stop doing, because it tends to have a more negative effect if you do that. So understand that it's going to be part of a number of people's roles to update a blog or have to use Twitter. And make sure that generally people who are already operating that environment will often be very comfortable doing that. So they may not be traditionally the people that you would think would be good to do that. You know, just find out within your organization who's already in those spaces, who already uses Facebook extensively, for example. The other key thing around this, I guess, is an understanding of what the business organization or what the organizations feel is with regards to things like Facebook. Many of them are actually blocked, or many organizations block sites like Facebook and like Twitter because they're deemed to be places where the staff mess about, for want of a better word. And you need to be clear about whether that's something that you want to change, whether the business owners are comfortable using those environments. And I guess it's quite common to see that maybe 5, 10 years ago, many organizations wouldn't let users use email because it was considered that they would mess about and use that environment in an unprofessional manner. And potentially, it depends, again, very much on the business attitude to those kind of things. traditionally these things tend to evolve, and so long as people are aware that it's an environment that they are being monitored in, which you can do, and that the information that they present there is something that the organization can see and it can be made disciplinary if necessary, then hopefully your users will be professional enough to use them in the correct manner. So last point from a tip is to ensure that you're adding value. Don't use social media just as an advertising platform. You have to look at it as being something where you're adding value to your people, to the people who are using the information you're providing. Give them insight, give them an understanding as to where products and where you can help, and help actually add value. If it's just advertising, you may as well just buy sponsored links on Google, to be honest. So, last thing to bear in mind is it's all very new. A lot of what we talk about today will have changed tomorrow, to be honest. There are very few rules about it. It is very difficult in some circumstances to measure it. We quite often have organizations approach us to do work that we've never heard of and have never had any involvement with, but have literally found us via blogs and LinkedIn and Twitter posts because we have added value. But also, we also find out a lot of information ourselves about monitoring, by monitoring what's on those sites and then joining in. And I guess this gives you an insight as to where to start. So as we said, starting to go from reactive, so start to activate the part, get some new profiles set up, start listening, start upgrading, and then start getting involved, getting your feet a bit wetter as you go through that process. And again, a lot of it is starting off by eavesdropping. It's the easiest thing to do. Go and just listen before you start opening your mouth. Understand what everybody else is saying and how it operates if you haven't been in those environments so far. Now, last thing I'll just mention is with regards to content. It's quite difficult, but one of the things that to talk about is to understand that and maybe take a different view on how you generate content as an organization. You can recycle a lot of that information, but so long as you start off, and perhaps this should be our tip number 7, so long as you start off with the generation of that content based on it being used in a number of different environments, is to start when you actually start creating new marketing literature or writing information for your website or changing your product brochures, to understand that you actually want to use that environment and recycle that information and put them into numerous environments and start to break that information down so that the content-hungry element of social media is addressed and you still have information to present out there. So, last but not least, for those who may not be able to read a slide, but tread wisely, as they say. The slide basically says, "I'm sorry, Captain, but we've had a bit of a problem with one of our passengers," and the captain basically is saying, oh boy, how many Twitter followers does he have? Last piece to understand, and I guess this is to make it very conscious to people who are within the environment and to understand where social media is getting to today, is to understand how many people and how it's impacting people. The use of the internet has grown dramatically, particularly within the kind of 30s to 65 groups are now dramatically jumping into those environments. So when people said, oh, we sell in certain environments and it's no longer relevant, be aware that those environments are now becoming a lot more relevant. There will be further updates to this seminar going forwards, and hopefully this is something that you've found of use, but be aware that people are out there and are listening. And I guess to finalize this morning's seminar, the cornerstones that we look at to provide you as an organization is to think, if you think of these being the things and the guiding points going forwards of social media, and how you should always consider the posts that you make based on know me, like me, trust me, buy from me. If you use that as a method of following through with social media, it's a good starting point and a good mantra to understand what you're trying to achieve in that environment. So it is about that know me, like me, trust me. By building that environment and recommendation environment, ultimately you get to the buy me point. So just to finish, we don't have a choice whether we do social media. The question is how well we do it. Or actually you can then look at my personal version of it, the truth will out. And that basically is that by looking at social media, the recommendation and being able to see ultimately social media is an acid test to the level of products and services that you offer. now organizations who traditionally would have been able to kind of hide behind a bushel of selling badly or failing to deliver are now becoming a lot more obvious that that information is now out there on the net, and those companies are just avoided, and obviously see the same sort of impact on their level of sales going forwards. So thank you very much indeed for all your time. As I said, the slides will be sent out to you in the next couple of days, along with a link to the video that was sent. There are other links on our website, and all it means to do for me today is to say thank you very much indeed for your time, and hope you all have a pleasant weekend. Thank you very much indeed.